Hi, I'm Ashy. Today I'm continuing my birth month animal series in watercolor with July, which is the ram. So I have created 3 different versions of the ram, as you can see in the thumbnail, but one is more traditional, one's whimsical with flowers surrounding it, and one is a cartoony version. And that's just to appeal to many different personalities and styles and tastes. So I hope that you find one that you like and that you give it a shot. If you don't feel like having a go at one or all of them, these are available as prints in my website to purchase at shop.craftywithashy.com. So you can always check out there if you're interested in purchasing a print of it. But I really hope that you give one or all of these a go. So in the tutorial, I do want to be upfront. These are sped up versions. This is not real time because each one of these takes about an hour to paint from start to finish. And that would just be much too long for a video here, but I do keep all of the content in the video. I just speed it up. I don't cut out any of the sections of painting, so you can see what I'm doing from start to finish. I also keep the live instructions that I'm doing while I'm painting it. I just kind of speed up around them, so you'll kind of hear my thought process and the techniques that I use for each painting as well. So let's dive in to the tutorials.
Okay, so we're going to start with our sketch for our ram to make sure that he is going to fit on the page appropriately. So I'm going to start with just some basic shapes here. So getting an angle in for the back and then kind of a bump for the side. And then that's going to come down and kind of be the belly there. And then down from there, we have a leg coming down the side. Again, kind of an angle from the outer part, a little bump for the thigh muscles, goes in a little bit, and then it's gonna come down and out, and then a little curve here for the other side of the leg, comes out to almost like a little triangle point, and then comes up and meets the body. From there, I can get in the front leg, so this helps me make sure that my shapes are in proper proportion to each other, so I get one shape in, and then I can go from there to start the next shape. So the front leg almost touches that back leg at the top, and then it comes forward a little bit, so away from the other leg, and then it's gonna come at an angle and come down to a hoof here. So there is that hoof, and then it comes up to a little knee. So rams, I think, kind of like goats, sometimes go down onto their knees when they're eating and stuff, so they get like these calluses on their knees, which is interesting. All right, and then the second back leg is going to come off of this front leg, basically. A little knee there, and then it comes out to the side and goes around like that. The body comes across here to the other front leg. So we have kind of a chest area, and then the other front leg comes off here, comes into that little callousy knee area, and then comes down to a hoof. Okay, they're kind of like knobby legs, like lots of bumps on them. And then it's gonna come here and come out to a muscle here on this side, like a shoulder muscle. And then it kind of just comes up straight to a head. Now I'll probably edit some of those as we go, but that gets the basic shape in. So now I have to figure out where the head's gonna go. So kind of look at my proportions here. It's going to be in kind of the middle of the legs here for the chin area, and I've got to figure out how high up I want the head to be. So I'm going to kind of start right here and see how I feel about that spot. So if that's kind of the chin mouth area, then this is where the nose will be, doing it really lightly to start with so that I can get an idea of making sure that I'm happy with the placement before I get it in really dark. And then up from the nose, have a little bit of an angle to an eye here. There's one eye, and then the second eye, same idea. It's gonna have a slightly tilted head, so this eye is gonna be just a little bit higher. I can refine those shapes later. Then coming off of the top of the head, kind of to an eyelid area. Okay, there's its head. And then same over here, a little triangle there. And then I'm gonna kind of come out this way for the body. And then on this side, the body is gonna kind of come out from where the eye is, make the neck here, come down to the chest. So kind of get that shape in there. And then have kind of a sharp angle here down to where the back is meeting the side there. And then the ears are gonna come off right near the eye. So we have just a kind of oval shape there. And then same with the other side, kind of coming off the eye. We're gonna have a bit of an oval shape here. Bring it down that way. Okay, now for the horns, that is really gonna pull this ram together. It's gonna come from right next to the ear, and then it kind of curves around a little bit, and then comes down to kind of a rounded off point, and then curves up toward the middle of the head. And then the head's gonna be kind of up here and kind of pointy in between the horns. The second one is going to be slightly lower again because we're tilted, so we need to make sure that we're emphasizing that tilt. And then it's going to come off this way to get the shape of the horns. And so I'm going to start with the lower curve because I have the ear here to guide me with where I want it to be curving. It's going to come pretty close to this ear here and then curve down this way and then out this side. For the point part, it's going to come up to a point here, and then this one kind of curves out that way. Okay. And then my second curve, I'm going to start at the point here, so it kind of comes down, right? And this is where it's turning. So you're going to see it cross just a little bit, and then it's going to come up behind and then get nice and wide at the top part, and then curve around to there. And then some of this will be like shading dependent, but it's gonna have different texture and shading to really define that shape here. Okay, now for the other one, same idea. So I'm gonna start with the curve that's closer to the ear, and I want it to be a little bit lower than this one, right? So if I'm horizontal across the page, it needs to hit below that one because of the curve, the tilted head. And then it's gonna curve around and come around similar to that one where it comes out to this point. And then it comes around this way, starts thinner, and then pretty rapidly gets nice and wide here at the top. And then same thing with this, we're gonna have some different shading, and this is gonna be darker and a different texture. So this front part is like more ridgy, like bumpy, and then the under part is a little bit smoother looking. All right, and there is the basic shape of our ram. So now I'm just gonna double check and make sure my proportions are all good, my angles are good, so slightly tilted. I like the proportions, I'm happy with the legs. So now I need to get in the hooves here. I'm gonna put in this first one, and they have, I don't know what it's called. I think it's called cloven hooves, where it's like split down the middle. So you can see that they have like two toes basically. Okay, so you kind of get that in. And same here. Maybe you'll see more of this side on this one, less of the other side. And then the back ones. Okay, something like that. Now I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and kind of clean up some of the lines on the belly here so that I can get them a little bit more defined with the shape that I want. The ram is going to be white. So obviously it's not gonna be pure white or anything. It's gonna be like an off-white, but because it is gonna be so light, I need to make sure that my pencil marks are nice and light. So I'm gonna erase them literally just almost all the way, except for the hooves, which are gonna be dark. So that doesn't matter as much. And like the horns are gonna be a little bit darker too, so those won't matter as much either. But the body, I just want the lightest hint of pencil mark. So now we can start painting it. Because the shape itself is going to be so light, I'm actually going to start with the horns just to get some like grounding and really get a sense of where I am. So I'm going to take a medium brush, this is size 10 round, and I'm going to take some brown. This is a mix of burnt sienna, burnt umber, probably a little sepia, and a little bit of ultramarine as well. But it's a just kind of neutrally brown color. I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow ochre in there too to brighten it up a tad. So I'm gonna take that color and I'm gonna wash that over the horns. Right now, I'm not worried about where those curves are or where it's gonna be different texture because this is just my base color, and then I'll add the texture and everything later. So I'm just getting in a starter color almost. Now take that same color and do the other horn. I'm really happy with this color. Okay, now I'm gonna take a little bit of burnt umber and kind of tap it around the bottom edge of the horns to get a little bit of a shadow. And here where it's curved, I'm gonna make it a little bit larger of a shadow. And then around the base. Okay, same thing on the other side. A little bit of a shadow here, and then a little bit on the bottom edge and around the base. Okay, where it's curving here, I'm gonna add a wider shadow on both sides. It's not very much color, it's just some slight shading to start to get some definition. I'm gonna erase some of this because I'm gonna wash out some of these hooves. I'm just gonna have the one main hoove, I think. And the rest is gonna look like it's maybe covered with some of the ground. Now I'm gonna take a little bit of my dark mixture here, which is just like sepia and Payne's gray. And I kind of just leave that there to use for darks. And I'm gonna tap that in for this hoof. Okay, take a little bit more Payne's gray, a little bit more sepia, make it even darker, tap it in. Okay. Now I'm gonna take some dirty water and brush that around. A bit of shadow. Now I'm just gonna drag away from those spots a little bit. Okay, some splatters. Okay, now here I'm going around the body and leg, washing that up into the sky area. Okay, I'm gonna take my towel and blot up some of it just to add some texture, loosen up the brown, and add a little bit more splatter. Okay, now I'm gonna let me add just a little bit more darkness into the ground. Now I'm gonna let that dry and then work on the ram some more. I'm gonna add a little bit more darkness down around where the feet are just to make it blend in a little bit better. Just adding a little bit of texture as well. Okay, so now I'm gonna work on the horns a little bit more. So to get the shape that I want and like the ridges, I'm gonna take some of that yellow ochre and some burnt umber, and then I'm gonna start close to the head and just add these little like U shapes here. And then as I get closer to the top, the U's are gonna get more shallow. And up here, they're gonna be upside down, basically. Okay, now I'm gonna take some darker color, so burnt umber, and tap that along the edge, and that'll bleed into some of those lines and give them a little bit more darkness toward this edge. A little bit of sepia as well. Okay, just pull some of that in just for some really dark shadows. And then I'm gonna take my lighter color again and take some of these lines and pull them down this way. And it's gonna kind of curve in and then back out. And that's gonna show the directionality here of the horn. So this one, I'm gonna pull it across and then come like down, like so. Okay, see how that's giving it a different shape and making it look a little bit more three-dimensional, a little bit more interesting. And then here, we're gonna have those little U shapes again. Okay, those little like ridges, sparingly using the darker color. So again, this is sepia, and I'm just using a little bit of it to make it pop. Back to a light color, and I'm gonna do just a little bit of dry brushing with a really light color. It's basically the same color as that initial wash, but just to add a little bit of texture to the rest of the horn. This little bit of extra shadow here, darken up the inside here. Okay, now I'm gonna do that same thing to the other horn. So starting with the light color, do little U shapes, getting flatter as we come across the top and curving back the other way. Do little like ridges here, make it look more bumpy, darker color. So this is burnt umber, and then the sepia. And then that lighter color again, pull it out from the ridges and then bring it down. Okay, and then a little bit of a shadow, a little bit more of a shadow here. A little bit of texture through here. There are the horns. For the eyes and nose, I'm gonna take my sepia, a little bit of Payne's gray, and then I'm gonna line top of my eyes. Okay, and then just kind of part of the bottom here. Same with the other side, and making sure it's lower on this side just slightly. Okay, there we go. Okay, and then the nose is going to be the same color, heart shaped here, making sure again that I'm slightly angled. Okay, fill in the round parts there, pull some of that down in the middle, and then the mouth. So it's just like two little curves from that kind of like stem of the nose. And then I'm gonna kind of fill in the space there. Okay, and then we're going to add some like warm brown. So yellow ochre with some burnt umber for the eyes, make them kind of golden. So do like a little dotting it in on both. And I want to leave a little bit of a highlight in there, so I don't want it to be solid. Okay, and then I'll go back and add the pupils once that dries. So now for some shading on the ram itself, I'm gonna take my yellow ochre with a little bit of the browns and add that in to some areas. So like around the edges here, and then I'll do some more gray colors for the shadows, but this will just be to get me started. Kind of define the face here a little bit with that color. Okay. Dry brush that on so that I get some texture going already. Underneath the chin, it's gonna be a little bit darker, a little bit grayer. So let me add some, dry off my brush and spread that out a little bit. A little bit of a ridge here, so more gray on that edge. Yeah, just a touch of that gray over on this side. And I'm literally just like tapping my brush down here to get those textury marks. So anywhere that there's like a little bit of a ridge gonna be, I'm gonna take the more gray color and touch it. And you can see that that's just adding that definition and that texture. Okay, just take a little bit of that gray and put it in the ears, blend it out, come back to my brownish ochre color, and define that edge of that ear, edge of the head, right around where the horns come out, a little bit of a shadow and some texture. Just a little bit of that texture here around the forehead. Come back to that yellow ochre. Add some texture on the back. Oops, too dark. That's okay, I can spread it out. Okay. This part's gonna be more gray because it's in the shadow. More bluish gray, so that's some Payne's gray in there. Okay, back leg, a little bit of shadow. All right, front leg, I'm gonna really get in where that knee is like, looks callous. So that's like a dirty, dark spot right on the knee. A little bit of shadow, and then a little bit of texture down from it and up. All right, and there's a pretty dark shadow. Gonna be where the legs meet the body basically, right? So there's gotta be some definition there. On this side, another shadow there. Okay, that knee again. A little bit of shadow. Okay, just some texture now down through the chest. So dry brushing here. A little bit more grayish color down here. Just kind of define this leg a little bit more from the background. Make it stand out a little more. So I think I'm gonna add just a little bit darker behind it. And then the leg back here needs to be in shadow as well. Just a wash of my like warm gray. Okay, now I need to add my pupils in. So I'm just gonna take some Payne's gray because I have it readily available and tap that in with just the very tip of my brush, leaving a highlight. Let's take some of that color and add it into the nose as well, just to get a little bit more variety there, and just the top of the mouth. So I think I'm gonna add just a little bit more shadow to the ears to make them stand out a little bit more. A bit more to the edge of the face here. A little bit more warmth down into the belly. Just got a little bit too gray, bluey gray for me. Now I'm gonna take some more splatter, take a stiffer brush because it splatters a lot easier. And I want a bit more into the foreground here. There we go. Now I'm just gonna take, again, that stiffer brush and do some more like vertical strokes here. So I'm just pushing my brush down, but vertically. And now I'm gonna dry it and make sure I'm happy with all of it. Whimsical version of the ram. So I'm gonna start by kind of sketching in a hill here. So this ram's gonna be like laying down on kind of on the ground behind this hill, and the hill's gonna have flowers and stuff on it. So start by just getting the ram placed in, make sure that they are gonna fit on the page here. So kind of get the shoulder there, and we have kind of the neck here, which I'm gonna put a wreath like of flowers around the neck, so that's not really gonna matter that much where that neck is. Okay, and it's gonna come up, and it's gonna come up. It's gonna kind of be facing this direction, so we get the chin in over here. Okay. And then the top of the mouth. Okay, and then the nose. Okay, and then up from this part of the nose is gonna come out, and the eye will be somewhere around here. Here's where the neck kind of comes out, and then we have the back here, kind of lumpy back. Here's the belly, and it kind of comes out to a point almost, and comes down this way. Make that hill come up higher. The mouth and kind of nose area need to refine a little bit, yeah. And then across from this one and up just a little bit, is going to be the other eye. Okay. Here, and I'm going to kind of make those ears similar to the last ones. So just kind of like an oval coming off where the eye is, basically. Okay. And then horns again. So kind of curve up this way, and then the back part is there, and the top of the head is kind of up here. Okay, and this one's coming out from above the eye as well. So now the curve around close to the ear. It's going to kind of come out this way and then curve down and away. Okay, same idea, getting in that kind of point, and it comes this way and then gets nice and wide up here at the top. And then the other side is going to come off the head, come up a little bit higher, and curve down this way. Now this one's going to kind of come and scoop like that, and then come back across itself a little bit to that point. So that one. Okay, and then this side is going to follow that curve around, get nice and wide at this spot where it starts to curve, and then kind of flatten out and come on back in on itself. And then this is going to curve along. I don't know why, but for some reason I feel like the face looks like a lion. And that's just what they look like, but it's kind of funny that it's like a lion in lamb's clothing. And then I'm just going to get in the indication of my stems for the wreath or whatever that's around the neck. Birth month flower for July is Lakespur, which from what I can tell is delphinium. So it's kind of like these long stem cone shaped flowers. So I have some that are swooping around and then some that are sticking out a little bit more. Lighten up the drawing, and the ram again is nice and light. So I don't want to have very dark pencil lines. So I basically just have the hint of my drawing there. It's very light. And then I'm gonna start with the horns like I did the last one. Okay, so some yellow ochre with a little bit of burnt umber, sepia, whatever mixture is in there. And do a wash of that color over the horns. Take a little bit of darker color and add some shadow along the curves. Okay. Back to that original color for the other one. Okay, a little bit of darker color for the shadow. Lift that back up a little bit because I want a little bit of a highlight on the one side. So let me just add that shadow to the right side. Now I'm gonna let that layer dry so I can work on the nose a little bit. So I'm gonna take a little bit of sepia, a little bit of Payne's Gray, pull that down in the center just a little bit, and then add the mouth. Tap it in to the middle where there is some darkness around the mouth. Add a little bit to the eyes. So top eyelid, little dots for the little, I don't know, tear duct area, I guess. A little bit of a curved spot on the bottom. Okay, other side, little dot up for the top lid, a little bit down. Okay, a little bit darker into the nose, and right at the top of the mouth. Now back to the horns. So I'm gonna take some burnt umber, some sepia, rinse that out, get the burnt umber, and I'm gonna do kind of a line here, curve that around, and then from there I'm gonna do my little U-shaped curves, getting flatter curves as I come toward the top. On this side they're actually curved the other way. Right across the top they're basically flat. Okay, and then I'm gonna take the sepia, tap that along that edge, and pull some of that out for some shadow, some darker shadows. Now I'm gonna pull down from that a little bit and add some lines on the inside of the horns. Add just a little bit more texture there, some dry brushing, and add shadow back here. Deepen up the shadow on this front part, and then leave that one edge highlighted. And then do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna do a line here with burnt umber, and then do my curves. Okay, and then some sepia, the burnt umber to create some dimension here. Okay, so we're gonna kind of curve around this way, okay. A little bit more shadow here, more shadow on this guy. Okay, now you can go ahead and add a little bit of texture onto the sheep. So I have some yellow ochre here, nice and light, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of that color on the back, just define where that edge is, a little bit of texture, and then take it toward a little bit more gray for this side, where it'd be in the shadow. Put it down from the chest, a little bit under the chin, really define where that chin is. Here, around the horn, okay, slight shadow here, a little bit of texture just across the whole thing. Just a tiny bit more under the chin just to define it a little bit more on the side of the nose. For the eye, I'm going to take a little bit of that yellow ochre and burnt umber mix and dot that in, leaving some white space both sides, just a little bit more. Okay, a little bit of Payne's gray for the pupil, dotting that in, leaving some white space. Now I just need to do the hill and foliage and stuff. For the hill part of this, I'm gonna get some loose green and some like pinks and some purples loosened up here. Get all that mixed together. Now I'm gonna take my apparently purple water, cleanish water, and go around the ram here in the background. So I'm doing the background hills. I'm not doing this foreground hill yet. And then when you're painting with clean water, if you just kind of look at it from an angle, so you can kind of bend down and look at it, you'll see where it's shiny and where it's not. That way you know where you've put water. Okay, now I'm gonna take some of my greens and just kind of drop them in to the background. Now there are some like puddles in some spots, so I'm just gonna, when I get to a puddly spot, lift it up with my brush, and I can move it somewhere else if I want, or dab it off on my paper towel. Towel, not paper towel. Okay, and then I'm gonna take some pinks and kind of loosen them up, get them a little bit lighter, and splatter that in to the background. And then same with some purples splattered in some of these areas where I want it to be closer to the ram. I can tap them in instead. Then I want a little bit of some darker greens. Tap that in as well. Anywhere that it's too puddly, I can take my towel and just kind of dab it out so that it doesn't bleed onto the sheep and cause any issues. I don't mind some of those puddles, but I don't want them to bleed onto the ram. Let it start to dry. You can even take a heat tool and dry it partially. And I'm gonna take some clean water and tap in some clean water into my background there. A little bit more pink, a little bit more purple. Now I'm gonna let that dry completely and then I'll work on the foreground. Okay. So nice subtle background. And for the foreground, I'm gonna start the same way, but then I'll add more detail with more layers. Okay, so just wet up that whole thing, put in some greens. Now some pinks, big splatters there because I'm using a giant brush and I have tons of water. Dab out some of those splatters that I don't want. And then the purple. Take that small and stiffer brush too. So if you're looking for kind of easier splatters, a stiffer brush is going to work better to get smaller splatters. Now these ones I'm okay with because I'm going to turn them into flowers basically. Okay, so just take this, again, stiffer brush, pull out some spiky greens, different directions. Some of them are gonna bleed into these pinks and purples, that's okay. Now I'm gonna take the end of one of my brushes here and I'm just gonna do some lines through. So it's gonna pull some of that paint along, cause some grooves in my paper and just add some extra texture. Now I'm gonna dab around the tape because I just want those areas to be a little bit more subtle. Okay, now some of this is starting to dry. So if I add some more pinks, they won't bleed out as much. And then same with the purples. So a little bit thicker paint. Now to turn some of these into flowers. So I'm just gonna take some light purple and basically tap. I don't like that brush for it. I'm gonna use, this is a larger brush, but it has a nicer point, and tap in some cone shapes basically. Okay. Right now I'm just doing it at the top because the rest of this is wet. So if I try to do it in there, it's not gonna actually do anything. It's just gonna bleed right back out. And then same with some pinks, get some cone shape flowers in there. So I'm tapping around loosely to kind of create that illusion of petals. And then you take some darker color and tap it in to create some shadow, some depth in some of those. And I'm just tapping, but the thing that gives it that illusion of the Larkspur or Delphinium is the cone shape. So keeping it loosely cone shaped is going to be the trick here. So some of these I'm pulling down in. Now that it's starting to dry, it's still gonna bleed out some, be out of focus, but using a thicker paint, and as it starts to dry, it won't bleed out as well. Now same with the pink, and this is just permanent rose. Okay, I'm gonna start adding a little bit around the neck here for that little wreath. So same thing, kind of cone shape, and I'll do pinks and purples here as well. And I'm just dotting them in. I'm not being very precise and like petal-like or anything, but I'm trying to make them a little bit wider toward the base and then come up to a bit of a point. Okay, this one will kind of be a rogue one pointing that direction. Now some purples, and I'll go in and add greens later once things are drying out. Okay, I'm just gonna take a little bit of darker pinks and add it into some areas for shadow, contrast. Okay, same with some darker purples. I'm gonna dab up some of the brightness here. It's pretty bright. Okay, for some greens. Okay, I need to pull some of those in. Just some leaf shapes. Just add some green in between some of these. Okay, splatter in some green just to tone down some of the purples and pinks a little bit there. Okay. Now I need to let it dry and then do the green in the wreath or the lei. I'm gonna take my liner brush for this one because I want these to be nice thin lines of green here. So I'm loading my liner brush up with green. Then I'm gonna drag it once just to get any like drop of water off of it. And then I'm gonna use just the very tip of it to create some wispy lines here. And then I'm gonna take a little bit and add some like green buds coming off the ends. And there it is. We're gonna start with sketching out the shape of the baby ram here. So we're just gonna start with the head, kind of getting a general idea of where it's gonna be placed. And I need to take into consideration the ears and the horns. So I wanna make sure it's in enough from the edge of the page here. And then I'm just kind of getting a loose oval in place here for the head. And then the body is gonna be another kind of loose oval here. And then we can go in and start to edit the shapes. I'm gonna come in and firm up this head a little bit. And I want his head to be tilted just a little bit. So I'm gonna try to make that oval angled a little bit more. I'm gonna start putting in more firm lines for the shape. Because again, his head's tilted, the nose is gonna be slanted as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and place the nose in kind of lower third here. And we're gonna have a little heart-shaped nose. And then the mouth is going to be down from the nose a little bit. And he's gonna have a little smile, okay? And then get the eyes in. So the eyes, I want to kind of come down close to the level of the nose because we're gonna have big exaggerated eyes and they're gonna be kind of U-shaped. So just put in little U's here and kind of angle them just a little bit. And then for the eyelid, it's gonna come like a little hump on the top. Okay, so this angle looks funny, so I'm gonna have it be angled a little bit more down. See, it makes more sense with the tilt of the head. Just a little bit more. And the eyes always look creepy until you kind of get in the iris and the pupil. So I'm just gonna kind of indicate the iris and that helps it look not quite as creepy. Now, he again looks funny still because I haven't put the ears in yet. So we're gonna put the ears kind of level with the eyes, a little bit kind of at the middle of the eyes. For the bottom part of the ear, it's just gonna kind of be a curve and then swoop up to a point, and then the same kind of teardrop shape. The head's gonna be a little bit too tall there, so I'm gonna take off some of that and curve it around from the ears. Now we're gonna get our little baby horns in. So I want them to start kind of above the eye here and making sure that I'm following the angle tilt of the head for that line. The horn itself is going to come out almost to the end of the ear. For the other side, follow a similar curve and swoop it to this point on the top of the head. And then from this point, we're going to have another line because you're just going to see kind of the underside of the horn a little bit. And then we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to come up here and over to near the ear and curve that. And then we're going to come out toward the end of this ear and swoop that over. Now this one we're going to see much more of the underside, the front of the horn instead of the top. Okay, now for its back, we're going to bring it down a little bit more. Because I had made that initial head too tall, I didn't get the back in the right place. So sometimes it's fine to just go back and erase and edit, and it's not a big deal. I want his back to be a little bit lower. So I'm curving down for the neck, and then the back comes and kind of curves over. Again, that oval shape, right? So he does have a little bit, I mean, his face isn't just flat, so he's gonna have a little bit of shadows here. So I kind of indicated where some of those shadows would be just to, I don't know, make my eye start seeing it a little bit better. Obviously that's gonna be defined with the paint though. And then we're gonna come down from the side of his face for the chest area. his little legs are tucked underneath him. He's curled up. The other one is going to kind of come from where his shoulder would be here and curve around, and then be nice and flat here along the bottom. And then we're going to do like a little flare for the hoof, and it's going to kind of be exaggerated. Little narrow ankles, and then come up to his knee joint, and then his back legs are going to be hiding kind of under the front legs. So I'm just going to put in the indication of the thigh, I guess, area. And there is the sketch of our baby ram. So now I'm just going to clean up some of the lines here with a kneaded eraser. So I'm going to start by rubbing out some of the lines that I don't need, and then I'm going to roll the eraser over the whole thing to lighten it up. Now it needs to be really light because the ram is white. So we want the outline to be really light so it doesn't show through our painting. For the painting part, we're going to start with just a light, like yellow ochre-y wash here. Really, really light. And I'm not going to put it over the entire ram. I'm going to go just in areas that there's going to be some shadows and kind of along the edges. So lots of water, and just kind of tap it along or drag it along the edges here. I'm going to start with the body first and get it defined, and then I'll go back into the head after. Okay, now I'm going to take just some clean water and drag that color through the rest of the ram, just so that it is set apart slightly from the paper, but I don't want it to have much color at all. It's a super light wash of yellow ochre mixed with whatever other was still in this well from previous paintings, but basically it was just yellow ochre. And then I'm going to take a little bit of grays. So this well had some Payne's gray, some sepia, some burnt umber, a little bit of ultramarine, but you can see it's mostly brown there. So I'm going to add just a little bit more Payne's gray. That was a lot. So I'm just going to take the smallest amount of that and tap that in along some of the shadowed areas. So under the chin here, and then the curves in the legs. Definitely this area is going to be all shadowed. Here between the legs is going to be shadowed. This back leg, or not back leg, but the one that's behind the body will be shadowed. So keep it really simple. This doesn't have to be crazy. And then I'm going to go ahead and start on the ears. So I'm going to get a light wash of my yellow ochre. And then for the baby, I'm going to take just the smallest amount of pink and tap it into the middle of the ears here. And just kind of let that bleed out. Take a tiny bit. I'm drying my brush so that when I pick up this light wash, it's not too watery, and take a little bit of that along the edges of the ears. Now I'm going to move to a smaller brush. That was a size 16. I'm going to move to a size 8 round that's got a nice point to do the face, just because I do need to be a little bit more precise. Now I'm going to go around the whole face, skipping the eyes, but I can go over the horns and the nose and the mouth. That doesn't matter. Now I want the face to be a little bit warmer, so I'm just adding a little bit more burnt umber in. That's going to be my shadow color. I think I'm going to do just a little bit of a shadow kind of on top of the like muzzle area there, and then same with on the bottom. A little bit of a cheek shadow there. So just very subtle shadows, nothing outrageous. And take a little bit more of that brown color and add it to the edges of the ears. Just a little bit more pink. Okay, I'm going to get in the horns now, and the horns are going to be a nice warm color. So some burnt umber with some yellow ochre to start. And I'm going to put that over the whole horn. Pick up just a little bit of a highlight on the underside. And then I want just a bit of a highlight on the top of this one as well. And then I'm going to take some darker brown, so more burnt umber, a little bit of my shadow mixed with that. And I'm going to take that for the top part, and there's going to be just like little curves. So it's going to bleed out because this is wet, but I'm just doing the very tip of my brush and painting almost dots, but where I drag it, it is curved slightly. Same thing for the other side. This one you're not going to see as much of it because it's more of the underside. Clean out my brush, come back over here and lift out a highlight again, and then come back and add more of that bumpiness. Just defining where that transition is between the underside of the horn and the top of the horn. So a little bit better definition there. A couple little lines coming down from the top of the horn. That just helps to demonstrate the directionality of those curves. Adds a little bit of texture also. As this dries, I can add just a little bit more texture there. Okay, now to come in and do the nose and the mouth, I'm gonna take some dark pink. Again, this is all just leftovers in my palette. So this is like a mix of reds, pinks, purples, a little bit of green to mute it. Just use whatever mix of pinks and greens you want. Outlining the nose here, clean my brush, dry it off. It's a very small area. You don't need much water at all. And drag that color into the center. Now I'm just gonna take a little bit more and put it on the far side so that the other side is a little bit highlighted. Tiny bit of my shadowy mix here to drag down toward the mouth, and then I'm going to paint the mouth with the pink color and then do the darks after. So we'll let that dry before I add the darks. For the eyes, I'm going to do like a golden brown to just kind of match them. So I'm going to use yellow ochre mixed with a little bit of burnt umber to make a nice golden brown. And I'm gonna go around where I drew that iris first, and then I'm gonna kind of tap that color in. I want to leave some whites here so that there's a highlight. So I don't want to go over the entire area. Now the mouth's dry, so I'm gonna add some darks. So I'm gonna use, again, that shadowy mix. It's not gonna be super dark yet. I can firm it up later, but this will give me a start. I'm going to do the inside of the mouth, around where you would see the tongue, and then just kind of line the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to take that same color and line the top of the eyes. Cute. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit more darkness into the horns now and kind of firm up some of those transitions and some of these curved lines, because this was painted, especially on this side, more wet on wet. I don't have any real defined areas. So I just want to add a little bit of shadow here behind some of the ridges. And it just really makes it pop more off the page there. Now I want to do a little bit more for the ears here. So I'm just going to add some thicker paint and make them look kind of fuzzy. And I'm just dabbing my brush. This is a dry brush with pretty thick or dry paint, right? So it's not thick in the sense of a real dark mixture. It was lightened up in the palette, but it's dried a little bit, so it's not as watery. Add a little bit of gray to it to get more of a shadow here on the edge of the face. And same on this side, just a tiny bit of gray to define it from the face. A little bit more yellow ochre on the head. So now I'm dry brushing. So I took some of the, again, dried out wash. So it's not watery, even though it's really light. I let it dry on the palette a little bit, and then just holding my brush horizontal and dragging it across the page to get some texture. And I'm kind of doing it for the whole face, except for like the muzzle area. And that will help, again, to make that muzzle kind of pop out a little bit. And then in areas that I want it to be more shadowed, I'm going to take a little bit of a darker mix with some gray in it and add that in. Do the same thing on the body. So on parts that are more lit, I'm going to take this mix of yellow ochre that was really watered down but has mostly dried. And you can kind of drag it quickly across, or you can kind of, I think it's called scumbling, where you kind of twist your brush in small circles, but super light so that you're picking up the texture of the paper. And here I'm using the very tip of my brush because I really want to define the edge of his face, but I'm still doing those little tiny circle motions so that it looks like it's woolly. In that shadow area here. Okay, a little bit of shadow here, where he's kind of bending. There'd be some lines and curves. So now I'm just following where I put those initial wet on wet shadows and adding in a little bit more darkness to make those shadows have a little bit more contrast. So I'm putting in that color and then cleaning, drying off my brush and dragging it around for some of the more subtle, lighter shadows. So where it's the darkest, I can put in a thicker version of the paint and then again, just drag it out. Okay, add in a little bit of warmer colors as we transition to the lighter areas. And if there's some texture to your shadows, that's okay, because again, this ram, baby ram, I guess would be called a lamb still, I don't know, is woolly, right? So it's not perfectly smooth and flat. So having a little bit of texture is actually a good thing here. All right, now we need to do this hoof, but I don't want it to bleed into the body, so I'm gonna wait until it dries. I can come back and do my pupils though. So I'm just using that shadowy mix. So it's like a warm gray, and I'm gonna tap it in. Okay, I just mixed up some thicker paint because I had too much water, but I'm just gonna tap it in around, and I wanna make sure that I leave some white space. That kind of glow in the eye is what makes eyes come alive, that reflection. So you just want to make sure that there's some white space. If you lose it though, it's okay. You can go back in and add it with mixed media, right? So an acrylic paint pen, white gouache, white acrylic, whatever thick opaque white medium that you have. So now I'm just adding in this same color to the dark areas. I didn't want to start that dark first because it's harder to go back and edit the shapes if you start really dark. I do need to add a little bit of nostrils here. So just a little slit toward the bottom of the heart. Okay, now I'm gonna come back and do this hoof. So I'm taking my warm shadow mix and putting that in. And I did look at a picture of a lamb to get an idea of the shape of the face and kind of this part, but it didn't include this part. So I'm just kind of making it up. And I did purposely exaggerate this back hoof. I'm sure they are not anywhere close to this big, but I just think it's funny when little baby animals have giant feet. That's why I like German Shepherd puppies, because they just have the most ridiculous giant feet and it's so cute. So I just wanted to kind of exaggerate that here. This baby ram, I'm sure, wouldn't have horns like this yet either, but that's okay. We can make it up, right? This is our artwork and this is supposed to be like a cartoony version anyway. So we can do whatever we want with it. Now I'm just adding some Payne's Gray to darken it and cool it down just a little bit for some of these areas. That is a little bit dark. I know it's gonna dry a little bit lighter, but I'm gonna lift up some of that paint. So just lightly touch it just so that it's not the main focal point necessarily of the painting. So I use a kitchen towel, and this kitchen towel has texture, but I actually like how the texture shows up on the paper. So sometimes you have things that you just use because you only have them, but then you find that you like it. So just something to think about. If you're gonna do lifting, you might wanna look at something with texture and see if you like it. A little bit more pink there. I do need to define kind of the edge of the eyes a little bit. So I'm gonna take a light shadow color and I'm just gonna outline the eyes a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to take that same color and add a little bit of a shadow where the eyelids would be shadowing the eyes. That's something else with eyes that is important, adding some shading, some shadows. I'm going to take a bigger brush now, so back to that size 16, and I'm going to add some water around the ram because we need shadows so that it's grounded on the page, and then I'll add some splatters and stuff. And I'm taking water all the way up the page just so that I don't get any hard edges anywhere. This is activating around the horns a little bit, but I don't care. I'm okay if they bleed out a little bit. If you do, use a smaller brush to go in those areas and be more cautious than I am with adding that. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of my lemon yellow deep just to get like a sun glow coming in behind him. And again, because I wet up the whole background, that's just gonna fade out nicely. Okay, and then my shadowy color underneath. Again, it's activating this hoof. I'll go in and actually sharpen that back up later because I kind of do care about that part. And maybe we want him laying on some grass. So I'm gonna add some green in, make it darker by adding the shadowy mix. Lift up some of that colors around the edge because I want it to be a little bit more of like a vignette style. So lift around the edges of the paper a little bit. I'm gonna dry that. Take my large brush again, dryer here, take some of that olive green and dry brush a little bit to incorporate the lamb into the grass a little bit more. So like it looks like there's some grass coming up in front of him. Just a little bit of water around these edges. Okay, a lot bit of water around the edges and soften them up. Okay, a little bit more. Okay. So here I'm separating the bristles of my brush and bringing it up. So it's almost like using a fan brush to create some of this texture, and fairly dry paint. And I'm getting darker versions of the paint too. And then a little bit of dry brushing up to incorporate some of those blades and make them look less out of nowhere. Okay, and that's pretty good. Now to sign it. I didn't do any splatters. Yeah, splatters. Just gotta have them in all of the paintings. I can't believe I forgot. Anyway, there's the finished ram.
Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed it. And just remember that these cards are available for sale on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. Have an awesome day.